Hello everyone, this is Goosebumps Godzilla, and today I'm going to be doing part 2 for my VS fight video to Mr. Wood versus Slappy. So viewer beware, you're in for a scare, and let's get started. Okay, so before you actually watch this video, if you've not seen part 1, I would strongly advise you to watch that, because in that video I'm going to be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each character. Before I actually get into the fight. In this video, I'm going to talk about the fight, who would win, and all that stuff. But just in case you haven't seen it and you don't want to watch 15 minutes about talking about the stats of each character, I'll just explain each character in a nutshell. So basically, Mr. Wood is powerful, just about as, both of them are pretty much equal. Both also, Mr. Wood is more of a violent player. He goes straight for the throat and does not hold back. And honestly, while not being the smartest of the ventriloquist dummies, is pretty smart himself, is pretty powerful, but he does have a reluctance to use his powers. Slappy, on the other hand, uses his powers a lot more because he is less powerful. Than Mr. Wood. He's not physically powerful due to him losing in almost all his fights with his human owners, so Slappy depends a lot on his powers. He also has a huge intelligence level, so that's both of their characters. They're pretty much equal, but we have to decide today who would actually win in this fight. Okay, so first, before I actually get into who I think would win in this scenario, I want to check out and see if there's any Goosebumps canon fights that we could attribute to evidence that either Mr. Wood or Slappy would win. And there's actually a little bit of evidence that Mr. Wood would win, and that is the Enter Horrorland website. So when the Horrorland books were releasing, Scholastic made this whole website called Enter Horrorland. I never got to go on that, because by the time I actually figured out that existed and stuff like that, the whole website was taken down, so never got to go on there. But according to Goosebumps Wiki, you could actually do a Mr. Wood versus Slappy battle, and you, the main protagonist, are supposedly Mr. Wood. So if I had my guess, unless you fail at the game, Mr. Wood would win. So, while it depends on the level of skill you have in the game, I guess, I don't really know, I've never played it, Mr. Wood, I think, would win in that scenario. So, that is some evidence that proves that Mr. Wood could win, but there's also a bit of evidence for Slappy being able to win. And while this never actually happened in Goosebumps canon, it does seem likely that Slappy did defeat Mr. Wood in some way, because we can see in the Escape from the Carnival of Horrors, Mr. Wood and Slappy are together, they're teaming up, and they're going to attack you in the Carnival of Horrors, depending on which path you take. But anyway, so Mr. Wood, I think, and Slappy, as I said before, team up, but then Mr. Wood and Slappy are never seen together again. It could be possibly taking place earlier, before the Night of the Living Dummy book, but I highly doubt so, just because of multiple reasons. So I highly doubt that, so I think this takes place after Escape from Carnival of Horrors. But how come Mr. Wood isn't shown teaming up with Slappy at any other time? He's never with Slappy again, and it's kind of against Slappy's character to share a servant. He never actually went through this scenario before, and he did team up with his brother Snappy in a way, an intelligent plan in I Am Slappy's Evil Twin, but I honestly think that Slappy would not share the reader, who would be you as a servant for life, and possibly could attack Mr. Wood, because, again, Slappy's never been around Mr. Wood ever again in the Goosebumps books or anything like Goosebumps, except for like the Enter Horrorland website or Night of the Living Dummy. So, if I had my guess, probably Slappy defeated him and then went away, and Mr. Wood, I guess, went on his own way. But I'm not really sure. There's no evidence to prove that, but pretty much Slappy and Mr. Wood have their own in canon sort of fights that proves that they would win a fight or not. So, what do I think about this fight, though? I'm not really sure. Don't worry, I am going to end this episode, video, I guess you would say, with a conclusive ending on who would win, but, I'm not really sure. So, for this fight to happen, we're gonna put them both in the same room, and both of them, I guess, know that the other one's alive, I would say. Slappy has access to all his powers, same for Mr. Wood. So, I think that this one would go down to a ghost versus ghost battle. So, Slappy could possibly, time freeze Mr. Wood or something, but I think Mr. Wood would go really, really fast while Slappy's, making his little jokes. He always likes to make fun of his enemies and doesn't really take, his situations that seriously. So, that is evidence for Mr. Wood, because we can see in The Dummy Meets the Mummy, Slappy is being beat up and all this stuff by a mummy, and he's, slamming Slappy's head against the wall. I discussed this in my earlier video, and Slappy isn't fighting back. He's just cracking jokes about the mummy and just doing all this crazy stuff. So the fact that he does not take the situation seriously could lead to his downfall, because Mr. Wood is very aggressive and goes straight for the throat. And so that could mean Slappy could die very, very early in the fight while he's trying to make jokes and stuff like that. And so it seems like Mr. Wood could possibly win in this way, and that will be the end of everything. But I highly doubt so. I think if Slappy realizes the seriousness of this fight, he would fight back, and it'd be a bit more entertaining to watch, but I think Slappy will still just crack jokes, and this will eventually lead to his demise. But that does not mean the fight's over, because once Slappy dies, his spirit sort of takes over, and he can do one of two things. Take over another object and become that object as a living thing and start attacking things and stuff like that. Not attacking things, but he can take over another thing's body. I think he would take over a living thing, but I think he also could take over an inanimate object to make that object animate, since he did make Slappy, the ventriloquist dummy, alive, even though it's technically his body. But I think he can give life to inanimate objects just from his spirit, sort of. I believe so, but he could also do the other way of doing it, which I think would work heavily to his advantage, instead of just going inside another thing's body, and that is become the ghost of Slappy, because we can see in the ghost of Slappy, that is his most powerful form. He can do so many things, and not get destroyed. So, yeah, it seems like that if Slappy was intelligent, and yes, he is very intelligent, so I think he'd take this way. Once he, realizes the seriousness, he will turn into the ghost of Slappy and start attacking Mr. Wood. I think then Mr. Wood would die. But I honestly believe that since he was made by the same creator, he should be able to do the same things. I mean, there's really no huge difference between Slappy and Mr. Wood other than their attitudes and how they go through situations, but power-wise, I don't really see a difference between Mr. Wood and Slappy. So I think once Slappy cracks open Mr. Wood, he will turn into the ghost of Mr. Wood. And so these are both of their most powerful forms, it seems like. So I think that would erupt into this huge battle of the ghosts. And so that's the part where I'm stuck, because they're both ghosts, and they're both in their most powerful form, and they both have pretty much the same powers. Slappy has a slight advantage, though, because he likes to use his powers, unlike Mr. Wood, who would probably, come running after Slappy, trying to do all this stuff. So that would make sense, but there is a slight problem for Slappy. Maybe the same for Mr. Wood. Again, they have different personalities, so this could be different. Maybe Mr. Wood really likes his ghost form because now he can be more dangerous and powerful and all this stuff. But as we can see in the Ghost of Slappy, Slappy likes being in his normal ventriloquist dummy body. So, most likely, I would say that he would try his best to get back inside of his ventriloquist dummy body. That either by, going as a ghost and trying to fix up his body. I don't know. In the Ghost of Slappy book, he never actually did this because, I don't know why he was able to, but he didn't. But he was still furious at the main protagonist in the book for destroying his body and wanted his body back. So, I think so, but I think he'd be hugely distracted on trying to bring back his body to life. So, Mr. Wood does have a slight disadvantage because he doesn't really like to use his powers half as much. But then again, Slappy could just only be focused on trying to build himself back together since he really likes his old body. So, overall though, I don't think that body thing will matter half as much. So, it's really who's got the more powerful version. The Ghost of Mr. Wood or the Ghost of Slappy. We don't have that much information for the powers of the Ghost of Slappy other than he can float into a bunch of other things, but he really does not have that much detail in the book on what his powers actually are. So we're left kind of to wonder what that actually is. But, I'm not really sure. But I said but twice. I'm sorry, guys. This is so hard. So, I would honestly say overall, though, Mr. Wood would have a huge advantage against Slappy just because Slappy would not be as physically powerful as Mr. Wood. And since the powers would not affect Mr. Wood as much as your normal human, stuff like that, I think Mr. Wood would win against a certain version of Slappy. And this certain version is the one before he got Goldie's powers in the Diary of a Dummy. So, honestly, I would say Mr. Wood would win against normal Slappy. So, congratulations, Mr. Wood. But, then again, I think Slappy would win overall, depending if he's in his Goldie-powered version. Because you can see in the Diary of a Dummy. It's not my favorite Slappy book, but that really doesn't matter to the fight. So, in the book, Slappy wants to get the powers of his sister, I think, named Goldie. And so she has this whole book of powers that are very, very, very powerful. And so, when Slappy got that, he turned Goldie into a mouse. They were both fighting. Pretty much an equal fight, I believe. I can't really remember. I haven't read that book since, August of 2020. So, I can't really remember exactly all the details. But I think that was a pretty even fight. And then when Slappy got the book, though, and he turned Goldie into a mouse. So, if Slappy has that book handy, though, which he probably does, most likely, depending if the fight would take place after the events of Diary of a Dummy, then Slappy would win, because this one's supposed to be more powerful. The book is supposed to have more powers that are more powerful than the powers Slappy had before. And Mr. Wood would not have these powers. So, I think, overall, if he does have the Diary of a Dummy, not the Diary of a Dummy, but, the book made by Goldie, then Slappy would win. But anyway, guys, that's what I think. Tell me what you guys think in the comments section below. Do you think that Mr. Wood would beat Slappy or Slappy would beat Mr. Wood? But anyway, guys, that's the end of my video, and I hope you enjoyed.